Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody in person here at the Zen Center. It's also good to see. I want to welcome everybody who's zooming in online. Thank you all for being here as well. All right. Today, this month is a month where we celebrate the Nirvana of the Buddha. So I am attempting to keep a theme here in the talk. Last week also was a kind of a Nirvana-ish theme. What I'd like to do is offer a phrase in Chinese to contrast that phrase with predominant views of waking up in Zen lore. Look at the science behind sleep. You might wonder, like, what's sleep have to do with the Nirvana? Well, we'll see here in a little bit, but there's a connection between sleep and Nirvana. And offering some Zen affirming stories that connect with, or Zen stories that affirm the importance of sleep. And then lastly, offer some recommendations that we might wish to practice together, maybe this coming week. Okay, so first I've got this Chinese phrase here up on the board. I'm sorry you guys online don't see this, but it says, finding joy in quiet. And it has a sense of being removed from the world. And this is a phrase from Chao Zan Rai and the Qing dynasty. And when I first started thinking about this phrase, I was reflecting on how difficult it is for me to actually find quiet time and find joy and pleasure when I have free time in general. And I suspect that's the case for a lot of people, that maybe we feel guilty if we have free time for ourselves. And with regards to this overall theme today of sleep, I know that personally, this has been a real challenge for me, and I think for a lot of us, we have a hard time with sleep. I certainly did when I first started training with my teacher, and I was hearing stories of these famous Zen masters from Japan and China doing all sorts of crazy things to stay awake, literally stay awake. And I thought, oh, is that the expectation? And so I did everything I can to minimize sleep until I actually got sick. And I saw a doctor who said, you need to get like a bunch more hours of sleep. And I thought I was doing something wrong by thinking I should get more sleep. But what are some of the stories within Zen lore that might have us think about sleep in a negative way? So that's what I want to begin with. What are some stories? And maybe you know some already, but I'll share a couple that I'm aware of. One is Dogen's enlightenment. Taizan reminded me of that. In Zen, there are the idea of enlightenment is it's not a psychogenic moment that somebody has, but we have all of these ideas that there's this sudden enlightenment, and that's not to say that we don't have periodic moments of like aha moments where we see everything in an instant. It's not to say that those kinds of things don't happen, but that's not really the emphasis, at least in Soto Zen, the way I understand it. Rather, it's a process. It's a everyday, ordinary mind is the way kind of thing. So, but when you look at some of the stories, they focus on, some of them focus on these waking up experiences. And many of them come from the book of a book called The Transmission of Light by Keizan Jokin. And they're wonderful stories. They're stories of the ancestors from the Buddha up to Dogen about their enlightenment experiences. Written by Keizan Jokin, whose name we just recited here, but he was not alive to hear directly from any of these masters. And he gives us the idea that there was some kind of a pivotal moment when all of these teachers woke up. By the way, next month we're having a precept ceremony here, and several of you just wrote out the names of all of these Buddha ancestors that are in this lineage, from the Buddha all the way to Zen Master Keizan. And these names they all have stories around them. And it's my understanding that many of them are fictitious. So we have to take them with a grain of salt. There may be some truth to, historically, there may be a little bit of marginal truth to them, but they're largely the conjuring up of Keizan. And that's not to belittle what he has done there. It was a very creative act, as far as I understand. And that's a whole nother study. And also, this is not to say that schools or teachers that study koans and enlightenment stories are wrong or bad. It's just to say that it's a different way of proceeding with the practice. Dogen, for example, he has Dogen waking up by hearing the monk next to him getting cracked over the head with a wooden slipper. Right? The monk next to him is sleeping, and the teacher, Tendo Nyojo, walks behind him with a wooden slipper and cracks him over the head with it because he's sleeping. So that gives you the impression that sleep is really bad, especially if you're doing it in the Zendo. It's really bad. There's stories of monks cutting their eyelids off so that they don't close their eyes ever. I mean, when you think about this is not really good for missionizing purposes. Who's going to want to tear their eyebrows out or their eyelids off, right? What are some others that you've heard?
The category Roshi used to have a stick you put underneath his chin.
Yeah, that's a common practice in Japan during Rohatsu Sesshin, where, and I've never done this, but yeah, you get there's a special stick, like with a little curve, and you put it under your chin, and you sleep sitting up. So it's not saying that sleep is bad. It's just honoring the enlightenment of the Buddha. Saying, the enlightenment of the Buddha, he sat up for 8 days, and so monks will sometimes do that to honor that period, and it's not to keep them awake. It's to allow them to sleep while sitting up.
So I heard a story, and some of you may help me remember. I think Nolan talked at one time about Katagiri Roshi, that they were doing some type of sesshin or whatever, and that Katagiri was, like, people were sleeping, and he kind of came around. He was almost crying, like, wake up! This is about your enlightenment. You need to wake up.
Right. Yeah, that's a very common kind of attitude. So we have these connotations around sleep that within Zen lore, within Zen practice, that that are really pejorative towards getting sleep. So we need to I think it's important to understand a little bit more about sleep from a scientific angle, and then look at some positive stories around sleep that come from the Zen tradition as well. Because I think overall, we all, including myself, have a real hard time getting enough rest, getting enough sleep in our society for a multitude of reasons. Now, I'd like to shift to the next subject, and that is the science behind sleep. And I've kind of outlined it here on the whiteboard, what I want to share. And I'm not an expert on this at all. I've been listening to a podcast by a man named Andrew Huberman. Maybe some of you heard him. Yeah, he's a neuroscientist and ophthalmologist at Stanford University. And he's got this wonderful podcast out. I highly recommend checking it out, because he talks a lot about the brain and the neurochemistry, and has lots of great guests on his podcast, including this one is based on a guest named Dr. Gina Ho, who's also a doctor of I'm not exactly sure, but a university professor and an expert on sleep. And she goes into great details, much more than I'll go into here, but she goes into great details on what happens physiologically during sleep and some things that we should pay attention to. So I thought I wanted to share with you all some of the highlights of what I learned from this kind of the science behind sleep, because I think it's just so important to understand what sleep is and its value. So, and again, this is not to say that we shouldn't try to strive to wake up, but again, this waking up, this enlightening, as far as my understanding goes, it's not a one-time event only, but it's a process. And Dogen's central teaching is that practice itself is enlightenment. And so when we come to the Zen Center, every moment is an opportunity to practice inside the Zen Center, outside the Zen Center, waking up in the morning, all the way to going to bed at night, washing our face when we wake up, brushing our teeth, fixing our bed, all of this stuff. And then when we come to the Zen Center, what we're doing is a reenactment of the Buddha's enlightenment. We're taking the seat of the Buddha. The cushion is called the enlightenment throne. And so when we sit, we're practicing Buddha. And the more you practice that, then it gets into your body. Simultaneously occurs, and now all of a sudden you got something that nobody else does. We're all on equal footing here. I'm not any better than any of you, and we just come to sit zazen and take the form of a Buddha as a form of practice. So I want to kind of make that clear that that's the Soto Zen kind of way of thinking about practice and all. And we tend to downplay a special experience. Not that those don't happen, and they can be very meaningful to many people. It's not to say another approach is bad, but just this is the way that I approach it and the way that my teacher shared with me. So that's what I share. But let's look at the science. So what I learned here is that there are within a usual and average night's rest, say somewhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep, there are 4 to 5 sleep cycles. The brain, the body goes through 4 or 5 of these cycles, and each cycle, if I understood this correctly, has 4 stages to it. All right, so the first stage of 7, you might become this within your own experience. The first stage is indicated by gamma rays in the brain. These are very fast waves, and it's the feeling of falling asleep. There might be some dozing involved. The second stage is somewhere between awake and asleep, and the third stage is slow waves. There's deep sleep, and it's restorative. And children are great with this third stage of sleep. When they're if you ever seen try to wake up a child when they're in that third stage, they don't budge, and if you do wake them up, they're very disoriented. But then there's REM, the rapid eye movement, and this is where the dreams take place. And if you wake somebody out of this particular stage, they might remember their dream and be cognizant of it. Oh, I had this amazing, And so all of these stages, this happens this is one cycle. These 4 stages take place in one cycle. And in general, a good night's sleep, you get 4 to 5 of these stages, lasting roughly between 90 and 110 minutes each cycle. All right. Now, the thing I wanted to point out here is one of the things I learned is that the first cycle of these 4 stages is really, really important. It's when growth, there's a big boost in the body of what's called growth hormone. Don't ask me what that means or how it works and all, but I just know that's what this teacher is saying, Dr. Gina Poe, she's saying there's a big burst of growth hormone that takes place in this first cycle. And what it does is it has to do with the way that memory is integrated. So the memories of the previous day or things that are active in your life, they get integrated properly into the brain. There's some activity with the proteins that's going on. So for folks that are, you might know people with memory loss issues or dementia and that kind of thing. This is I think it's not unrelated to that. It's something that we should be proactive about right now, is getting that first cycle in. And Dr. Poe says that this cycle is on a circadian rhythm, so that if you get, for example, if you get consistent, if you're a child that goes to bed at a regular time, say 9 p.m. or 8 p.m. every night, gets up at a consistent time every night. So that first cycle, at that time, 8 p.m., your body's going to introduce this a big boost of growth hormone, and this is the only time in the night that boost of growth hormone will take place. And if you go to bed later than that, you miss that boost of growth hormone. It doesn't do its job. So you can't like make it up. You can't go to sleep later and then it starts then, because it's on a circadian rhythm. So it's pointing to the importance of getting sleep at a consistent time as best as you can every night. I mean, that's really hard for me. Sometimes I want to stay up late, and I'm sure you all have had a similar kind of preference of like staying up later. But it's pointing to the importance of that first cycle, because of this is the time when the body releases this particular hormone. And if you're not asleep during it, it won't get the chance, or it won't have that chance to do what it needs to do. And this integrating memory and all of that stuff. So it's just pointing to the importance of paying attention to when we go to sleep, and doing so at a consistent time. So I'm going to say more about that in a second, but let's look at some Zen affirming stories around sleep, because I think we really need those. I need them. I need to hear them. So there's a story of a student going to a teacher. Where is it here? He goes to the teacher and asks him about Zen practice, and he says, when hungry, eat, when tired, sleep. And the student says, well, doesn't everyone do that? And the teacher says, most people entertain 1,000 desires while they eat, and untie 1,000 knots while they sleep. Oh gosh, isn't that the case? Mm-hmm. Right? We're not really eating, we're not really sleeping, we're doing all this other stuff is going on. So that's one story. And he said, when hungry, when tired, sleep. Can we do that? Can we practice that? Ordinary mind. There's another in Dogen's instructions for. Now this is for monastics, for people who are living together in a monastery. But I think it's also applicable for people who aren't living in a monastery too. I don't live in a monastery. I live with my wife and child and another child to be, and we have other folks living with us as well. So, I think there's relevance here. He says, when the community, when the assembly rises, everyone rises together. When the assembly goes to sleep, everybody goes to sleep together at the same time. It's not our practice to stand out. That's again another affirmation that the practice of the Zen practice is not about a special experience of one person and a special insight, but the practice of going with the flow of the community, finding harmony in the community, which is not an easy thing to do many times. But if you think about what should I be doing, well, what are other people doing? Are they all sleeping? Okay, maybe I should go to sleep. This is from somebody living in a temple. They want to know, what should I do? Well, what is everybody else doing? Is it time to sleep? Are they going to sleep? Okay, let's all go to sleep. And there's some kind of a collective rhythm that you get hooked into when you're thinking of what's called Daishin McCabe, which means the Great Assembly, practicing together as one body in the Great Assembly. And that's what we're doing here when we're doing ceremony, right? That's what all those bells are about. They're indicating, oh, we're going to all do this together now at this time, or we're all sitting zazen now at this time. And for those of you who've been sitting together for some time, you might notice that there's a kind of a rhythm that we get, like a collective rhythm that you might feel when we're all together sitting at the same time. My teacher would often say that when we sit together like that in the evening hours, then we sleep better. Right? We're starting. It's a good way to enter into sleep by starting to by sitting together before bedtime. And in family life, in my household, Gisho and Malcolm, they go to bed together in the same bed, and they're both gone within 5 minutes of me saying goodnight and turning the light out. And I usually stay up a little bit longer, and sometimes I get in this bad habit of watching something that I shouldn't be watching. And it takes a lot of discipline on my part to say no to that. And instead, what I've been doing is when I'm successful at it, I open a book that is it's a historical fiction book that I enjoy reading, but it also helps me to it prepares my brain to shut down, and I found really helpful. So that's something I found really helpful. So I'm trying to go to bed like within an hour after they go to bed, and keeping in that rhythm. Anyways, I'm just suggesting that as a possibility, like noticing what's happening in your family, around you, and that kind of thing, if that's possible. I know sometimes if we live alone, that's a different story, and it might be difficult. When I think about times I've lived alone, you'll have to, finding some kind of a rhythm that works. But another thing I want to mention is when we go to sleep, Soto Zen is explicit about how to do that. And Dogen really, from what I understand, is that he sees the process of going to sleep as also an extension of our practice enlightenment. That how we enter sleep is a mindfulness practice itself. And so there's prescriptions within Soto Zen for how to do that. And I learned this being at the monastery. Basically, you lay down in the Nirvana pose of the Buddha. Last week we celebrated Nirvana, and we know the Buddha is depicted as sleeping on his right side with his, holding his head like that. That's not how we sleep usually, right? But we have a pillow under our head. We bring our right hand under the right side of our face or under our pillow, and the knees are slightly bent. And having your right elbow tucked into your right side like that, I learned this from studying yoga. They suggested starting out, there's something that happens when you put your right hand, it's stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system when you sleep on your right side. And the yoga school where I trained, they suggested starting out on your left side, because that stimulates the sympathetic nervous system and kind of warms the body up, maybe for the first few minutes, and then rolling over to your right side to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system to cool you down and prepare your body and mind for sleep. But I don't want to suggest that we, by any means, stay in one position all night long like you were doing Zazen. That would be extraordinarily uncomfortable, and you'd probably be awake a lot. So, or maybe not. You can try that. I mean, you're certainly welcome to try that, and that's what they prescribe in a Zen monastery, like staying on your right side. And one teacher said, if you can't do it the whole night, at least start in that posture. And then you could remember, oh, this is the Buddha's parinirvana, right? This is you're entering, just as when we're sitting Zazen, we're reenacting the enlightenment of the Buddha. When we're laying down, we're reenacting the death of the Buddha. And so from birth to death, when we wake up in the morning, we start out with acknowledging the blessings of life, going to bed, acknowledging that there is also death, right? Sleep and death are very related. And then we don't have that same fear around death if we practice it, remembering the Buddha, and this is the position that he lied in. So recommendations, I want to close with some recommendations here, take them or leave it. My thought is that maybe we could try practicing this for a week. Check it out, see how it goes for a week for you, if you notice any differences. If so, maybe you want to extend that. If not, maybe you want to modify it in some way. But one is to see your sleep as an extension of your Zen practice. And number two, try to sleep in harmony. If you're with other people, try to go to sleep. Other people might not want to be in harmony though too. So it's tricky. But if you have family or kids, you could try keeping in the same flow of when they're going to sleep, when they're rising. Don't do anything that creates excitement just before bed, like watching something that is exciting. Could really disrupt those beginning stages of sleep. But you can also verify that for yourself if you don't believe me. You'll know, oh, when I watch that film, I feel really perhaps do something that helps to quiet your mind down, reading something that's pleasurable but not too exciting. Maybe having a hot cup of tea if that works for you, or taking a hot shower or something. Maybe you have some of your own ideas of what helps to settle the mind down. All right. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, maybe you're going to mention it, but I remember when I was at the monastery at Rinpoche learning the Gata, like going to sleep tonight.
Tell us that one.
I think it is, though, correct me if I'm wrong. Going to sleep tonight, I vow with all beings to calm all things in the 10 directions.
You can say a Gatha like that. Say it again. So, as I go to sleep, may all be.
Well, you say it, because it's different. Okay. As I going to sleep tonight, I vow with all beings to calm all things in the 10 directions. And then 3 vows and then go to sleep.
Go to bed. Yeah, that's a great one. I often do one a Gatha from Thich Nhat Hanh. That one, I've done that one, but whatever.
How does yours sound?
As I going to sleep this evening.
Sorry.
And now I'm going to see. The day is ending and my life is one day shorter. Let us look carefully at what we have done. Looking deeply at. Now I'm getting confused. Getting
Sorry.
It.
I remember that's one day shorter.
My life is one day shorter. Let us look carefully at what we have done. Let us live deeply each moment and in freedom, so that time doesn't run away meaninglessly, or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's not the exact one, but one of the practices is to reflect on what you did during the day and just kind of go through and remember from the last minutes to the beginning of the day, and think about how was my actions in these things. Not too deeply, but just remember, go through, oh, this happened, and just before you go to sleep, as a kind of practice. Yeah, thank you for bringing up the Gotha. That could be a very wonderful way to go to sleep. So that, yeah, and seeing if we can find some joy in it, finding joy in quiet. So circling back to this phrase here, finding joy in quiet. I think sometimes we fear rest. There may be an anxiety response to it sometimes, especially when we're feeling sleepy in the Zendo. We think, oh, I'm supposed to be awake, but maybe there's some anxiety that, my experience has been is that if you stick with the bodily sensations and allow yourself, I just want to give people permission, if you need it, to relax your body. And if you find yourself sleepy during sitting, it's okay to go into that without fear. One of my teachers, Yogo Suigan Roshi, said that if you're sleepy in Zazen, well, you sleep, and then you'll eventually be awake. That's what he said. And I remember Nonan saying too, that he was talking about his experience at the monastery, and there was time for Zazen in early afternoon or mid-afternoon. There was a period of Zazen shortly after, like an hour or so after lunch, and he said that was my nap time. So it's okay. It's really okay to feel sleepy and drowsy during Zazen. And I just want to give permission to go into that and see what happens. You might surprise yourself. I know you might be surprised yourself what happens when you get sleepy during Zazen and not fight it.
Yeah, I also give permission for people to sleep.
He's the master.
That's my practice of sleeping. Yeah, Wednesday nights when I used to sit with Nonan,
Yeah,
I was just running in from work, and I'd get in, everything ready, and go on, sit down, and boom, out for 20 minutes. And it was just deep sleep, but that's nice, because you come out of the sleep. I would come out of the sleep, and then there would be kind of this buoyancy.
Right.
For the rest of the period.
Right. That's kind of what we want. If after a good night's sleep, you feel well rested, and then you can, yeah.
And I agree. Like, as I'm getting older, I'm like firmly middle age now, and so like sleep has become such a priority for me, and it's been a game changer. I realize how important it is for me to have like good sleep hygiene. And I also wanted to add that, like, for some people, despite our best intentions, like I would love to get sleep, like maybe they had like some generalized anxiety, like maybe despite best intentions, sleep is kind of a fraught kind of a subject.
Yeah.
And I would just, like, in that case, encourage, there are things that you can do, like progressive muscle relaxation. There are these different tools that you can use. Also, like, if you have like kind of ruminating anxious thoughts while you're laying there are things you can do with that too. Like, there's an exercise called Leaves on a Stream, where you like visualize placing your thoughts on a leaf continuously and watching it flow down the stream. So you're not trying to engage in your thoughts, you're just bearing witness to your thoughts, and it helps you kind of defuse from those thoughts and give them a little bit of space. And then maybe also just treat yourself with kindness, because if you're just trying to sleep and you're just not going to sleep, you can maybe like beat yourself up over it and like, what's wrong with me? And it's okay. Like, really, it's, I think the goal is to not escalate that situation, just kind of try and keep it at a baseline as much as possible, and just be kind to yourself. So
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is that. I mean, we can shame ourselves endlessly around not getting good sleep, and that's not the intention here either. But just to point out, of course, sleep. There's things that we can do to assist us in sleep. What Sarah just mentioned, disengaging thought. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Daishin. Thanks, everybody. Well, when I was, it was hard to sleep at first. Like when I went to, prison for a long time, I had 7 other roommates, and to promote harmony, and it was very difficult. So what I found was that earplugs were very helpful for me. And without earplugs, I probably would have been in trouble. But some guys could just lay down and go straight to sleep, and they didn't need earplugs. And then recently, I read I think it's Viktor Frankl's book, and he said the guys who used to be sound sleepers when they were in the internment camps, is that what they were called?
Yeah.
And the concentration camps, and that, after a long day, slavery or a long day's work and very little food, they go right to sleep and sleep next to each other. And I'm like, well, for me, if I have a busy day or a productive day and I'm doing things that I feel good about, like I got what I could have done that day, for me, it's easier to go to sleep that day instead of thinking, oh crap, I should have studied more, or oh crap, I should have, so that's what's helpful for me.
Yeah, I needed earplugs in the temple, in the monastery, because people were snoring like crazy. But I'm a light sleeper generally, so I learned that the hard way. Yeah.
I just think it's really interesting to think about how many spiritual, and particularly monastic practices are almost designed to limit sleep. I mean, if you look at the Catholic monastery, for nunneries, their schedule, and the schedule, I think, in a lot of Buddhist monasteries, particularly in the East, just doesn't allow much time for sleep. And I was also thinking of a story that Jack Cornfield tells, that when he was studying in the East, that he kept falling asleep during meditation, and the teacher had him do his meditation sitting on the edge of a deep well.
Right, yeah, so those are the stories. I think it's valuable to study this on our own more and see what the information, there's so much good information out there about sleep now. I wanted to mention that it's natural for a lot of us to wake up in the middle of the night, maybe for a little bit. And one Zen teacher suggests, he was a Jesuit priest actually, and a Zen teacher. And during a sesshin, he said, if you wake up in the middle of the night, sit on, and he was talking to Catholic monks and nuns here. He said, sit on the edge of your bed and follow your breath for 5 minutes, and then go back to bed and see if that helps. So, there's little things like that. When we do wake up in the middle of the night and you're perky, well, maybe try sitting zazen. That might be a good time for it. And it helps to disengage with the thoughts a little bit, get back in your body. And oftentimes, I've done that sometimes, maybe 5 minutes or even longer if you feel like it, and then go to sleep. Try sleeping again. You might be more relaxed after sitting up for a little bit.
Yeah, I just wonder if it's tied in with this idea of self-sacrifice that comes with a lot of religions.
Right, yeah, that's the dark side.
No, I know
It can be.
Lakota have that too, Pam, and so I think a lot of spiritual traditions, and I think there's something to be said about a certain amount of sleep deprivation. And I don't know why, and I don't remember why, but I have actually read that sleep, I mean, I don't mean like, you go on an hour sleep, but it helps you, I guess, get rid of a lot of stuff, so you can.
Well, maybe it tires out the logical brain.
What to do?
No, I made a facetious comment.
Okay.
You said it gets rid of a lot of stuff. I said, like joy.
Okay. That's good too, yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe it's to take your brain to the limit of its logical rationality.
Exactly,
so
let
that,
it, and you're so tired you can't find it, yeah, you don't find it.
It's like at the end of a day of sashimi.
Right.